Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the She's Got GAWL podcast, brought to you by the Georgia Association for Women Lawyers. I am Ebony Phillips, your host, and I'm very excited for tonight's episode. We are going to just jump right in because we have one of the premier financial experts with us tonight, Financial Coach Meagan, as we like to call her, McGuire McGuire. She is a certified student loan professional as well as a chartered financial consultant. So she knows all things money, right? And this is a time of year where a lot of us start thinking about money, how to be better about it, how to make sure we're doing the right things by it. And sometimes it can be really tricky. I'm not going to do a long bio on Meagan, but I will invite you to her website. It is slpwealth.com, and that's S like Sam, L like Larry, and P like Paul, slpwealth.com. You can find out all about Coach Meagan, and then you can also figure out maybe what her services are and those kinds of things. So Meagan, welcome to the She's Got GAWL podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much. You might hear my dog every so often too. He's in the room with me.
That's perfectly all right. Perfectly all right. So, I feel like a lot of us, myself included, may have a little bit of anxiety about money and finances and managing money. And
Mhm.
as we get to be a little bit more seasoned, I'll call us, we really start thinking about, have I managed my money well? Am I doing the right things? And so I know there's like a ton of things we could probably talk about, but I was hoping that we could focus on budgeting, saving,
Mhm.
and investing tonight, if that's okay. I think those are like three big ticket items that people really want to cash in on to make sure they're doing the right thing. And I'll be honest, I have heard the word budgeting a lot of my life.
Mhm.
I'm not 100% sure I know what budgeting really is, though. Like from a
Mhm.
financial perspective, not a layman, but like, what is budgeting?
Yeah. Yeah, so budgeting, it is sometimes a cringeworthy word. People don't like to budget or they feel like it's a very like grueling process. And I think it can be depending on what kind of budget you're working with or trying to work with. But really, budgeting in its essence is really just having a parameter for where your money is going. And that's super important if you have goals that you're trying to accomplish. Because if you don't know where your money's going, then it's going to be really hard to put money where you want it to go. And so a
Right.
budget can help you with that.
Now, can a person be, and I'm using the term financially healthy tonight. I know some of us aspire to wealth. I get that. But
Mm-hmm.
as I kind of think about it, maybe you have to be financially healthy before you can be wealthy. I don't know. That's just kind of how I think
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good way to put it.
yeah, but so as we aspire to financial wellness, can we be financially healthy without a budget? Is that even a thing to be able to do it without a budget? I don't know.
Yeah, it can be hard. Now, it's definitely not impossible. If you're
Okay.
someone whose spending habits are like really below your means, always, like you're just not a spender, you are
Mm-hmm.
pretty frugal naturally, then you probably don't necessarily need a budget. And there's different types of budgets too. Like there's the kind of traditional style budget where you're categorizing your expenses. That's a pretty exhausting way to budget, if I'm going to be honest. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like a parameter based budget, which is a little easier where you just say, hey, I've got X amount I can spend this month. And if I'm within that range, I'm good.
Okay.
That's a little easier. But is it possible to be wealthy without a budget? Yeah, I think so. It just might take you longer to get there. Um, or there's just not as much awareness around where your money does go if you wanted to make changes. So you'd have to really, backtrack to figure out, okay, where is money going so I can make some
Right.
changes.
Right.
So,
And so as we think through our conversation tonight, um, I'm framing it as three things to do in 30 days to improve
mhm.
your finances. So from a budgeting perspective, what is one thing that maybe our listeners could do within the next 30 days to
Mhm.
improve their financial health regarding budgeting?
Yeah, this is a good time of year for this because a lot of times your bank or your credit card companies will send you an annual spending report on like what you spent in the past year.
Hmm.
They'll give you a cool little pie chart that shows the categories. So this is a good time of year to take a look at that. A lot of people just delete that email when it comes through or, delete the message. But I think awareness is a really, really great thing because when I put together a plan for a client, I have them do an exercise to go through and find what their variable expenses are, which variable expenses are just things that aren't going to be the same every month. But fixed expenses are like the mortgage and your car insurance. Like we know what those things are. But the
Right.
variable expenses, those are the ones that, you know, we they change day to day, week to week. So my homework for folks is to go back and take a look at the past like 3 months, 6 months, get a feel for how much you spent in certain categories like food, eating out,
Hmm.
entertainment, things like that. And almost always it's always I feel like eye-opening to the client to say, wow, I thought I knew how much I spent in this area. I didn't realize I spent that much. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's
Hmm.
not a bad thing. Like sometimes they're
Right.
still within like a healthy parameter, but it can give you some awareness and also it can help you identify things that you're not using anymore, that you don't want to spend money on, or
Right.
things that just like don't bring you joy that you don't care to be spending money on anymore. So awareness is key when it comes to not necessarily the budget per se, but more so like knowing what you're spending.
Right. So, I was watching a program the other day, and they were really hammering this notion of savings, right? Save, save, save. And I started thinking about it, and they said something like maybe 25% of Americans don't have an emergency savings,
Hmm.
which kind of made me a little bit nervous because I'm always thinking, what if something were to happen? What if something were to happen? But
Hmm.
then with them drilling down on emergency savings, I thought, well, to me, that would suggest that there are different types of savings. So I wondered, like, what you thought about that. If you think there are different types of savings, and if so, like, what should just the average person, what type of saving, I guess, should we
Hmm.
be focusing on?
Yeah. I think that stat is probably true. A lot of people don't have emergency savings on hand. Um, so that can definitely be problematic if something unexpected comes up, you're laid off, you're injured, um, your tire blows up on the highway, whatever it is, like it
Mm-hmm.
could be
Mm-hmm.
problematic if you have an expense you're not expecting. So I do think savings can be filtered into three separate buckets. And I'll keep it pretty simple, but one savings bucket is for kind of the immediate things, which I
Okay.
would include emergency savings. So that savings should be pretty boring. It should not be invested. You could put it into a high yield savings account, which is just usually it's an online account at a FDIC insured bank that gives you a little bit more interest on your money for sitting there. Those are pretty cool right now because they're paying a little over 4%. So not too shabby. The second bucket is kind of your intermediate bucket where it's not money that you need right now. You have your emergency savings for that, but it's probably money that you want to use before you go to retire or
Mm-hmm.
in the next like 5, 10, 15 years. Um, that bucket is I intermediate bucket. I typically say that could be invested and probably pretty conservatively though. So we'll get into investing here in a little bit. And then the last bucket for savings is retirement savings. So that's money that you don't want to touch until you go and decide you're not going to work anymore for your income. You're going to live off of the savings that you saved over time. And that can be invested a little more aggressive because it's, typically further out. But those are really the three main buckets you should be thinking about. And
Okay.
emergency savings is that first bucket you should focus on first and
Okay.
foremost.
And is there sort of a rule of thumb in terms of percentage of income that should go in either bucket, or
Yeah,
what is your
there.
recommendation to that?
So 3 to 6 months is the recommendation. 3 months if your income is very stable or you have a spouse that also earns income. 6 months if your income is a lot more variable,
Okay.
or you're more variable or you're a single individual, that's probably ideal. 3 to 6 months of your necessary living expenses. So that's not necessarily like a percentage of your income, but that also goes back to why budgeting might be important because you need to
Mm-hmm.
know how much you spend, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
So it sounds simple the way you break it down. Um,
hmm
but how can we really get started saving consistently? Like if it, so remember we're talking about 3 things to do in 30 days, right? So
hmm
what is one thing that our listeners can do around savings within the next 30 days that's doable, right?
hmm
I mean, there's going to be some pain, I would imagine, if you're cutting your discretionary spending and saving more, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And but also that could give the consistency
hmm
that I know a lot of experts such as yourself recommend.
hmm Yeah. So I think one really easy, quick tip would be to set up an auto deposit into savings. And that could be done if you're at an employer. A lot of employers allow you to set up auto deposits from your paycheck, where you can, designate a certain amount to come from your paycheck to go straight into savings, which is pretty cool because it's kind of like your retirement savings, like 401k, how you could do a percentage. It gets it out of your bank account. It doesn't even hit your bank account. So that makes savings a lot more easier in a way because you're not having to actually make the transfer, which is a little more painful, right?
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm,
but yeah, I think step one is to get a feel for your expenses because then that can tell you, step two with savings, how much you can maybe set up on an auto deposit. And that could go to your emergency fund if you know that
mm-hmm,
that needs some work, or if your emergency fund is set up, you're good to go there. That can go maybe increase your retirement savings from your paycheck. If you're a business owner, this could still be the case. You could still set up like kind of a bill from your from your checking to your savings on a specific day of the month and just treat it like a bill. Move it straight over like it is a bill that you would pay. That would be a good step for savings.
So your recommendation is to put it on autopilot. Just put
Mm-hmm.
it on autopilot.
Yep.
Okay.
Makes it less painful.
Have it leave before you even see it or get access to it, I suppose.
Right.
So now we're talking about saving. And the other big ticket item that I said we'd speak about tonight is investing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But before we get really into that, is there a difference between saving and investing? And if so, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, I think investing, sometimes people use that term in different ways. Like you could be investing in your future, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're putting money towards something. It might be your education.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so investing, I would think of as more of a long-term savings objective.
Yeah.
So and then savings in general, savings would be, I think they could be one and the same because if you're investing, you are saving. But savings, I would probably use more so for setting aside for something more immediate or like a lump sum that you're going to need pretty soon. Like if you wanted to buy a house or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, yeah, that's how I would differentiate the two. And investing, of course, that might deal with getting the money in the market, the stock market, investing in different funds to appreciate what you've got. Sorry.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So I know that we will have some listeners who are probably beginners,
hmm
but then probably some who are maybe a little bit more seasoned investors. And I wonder if there is a recommendation that you give around investing for beginners versus non-beginners, or is it all just the same thing?
So I think it could be the same thing, but I think starting out, I think the easiest, fastest way to start investing is to take advantage of your employer plan. So if you're
Okay.
working for an employer, there's likely a 401k available, could be a SEP IRA or a TSP if you're a federal employee. So there's usually a bucket that you can contribute to through your paycheck that goes to your retirement.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to start investing, and the best way to, how much to contribute I would start off with getting up to the match of what your employer will match if you contribute. So that means your employer might say, hey, if you contribute 3%, I'll also contribute 3% to your account for you. So that's a super easy like threshold to get to, at least, because you're getting some return on your money right then and there from your
Mm-hmm.
employer putting money into retirement for you too.
Okay. Now, and that's for beginners and non-beginners alike. That's just for anybody an
Mm-hmm.
easy way to like get your start, I guess, or if you're already investing to continue what you're building on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I gotta be honest, that word investment does kind of scare me a little bit, right? Because there's so many products out there. There are so many solicitations for people to help you. And then on the flip side of that, there's always some news story about somebody who got taken advantage of. Do you ever recommend, other than like the simple thing that you just said with getting the employer match, do you ever recommend for people to, if they're going to do something other than something like that, to go it alone, to do it on their own? Is it possible to do it on your own, or is it so complicated that you need somebody to kind of guide you through it, who's a professional and who's certified and the like?
Mm-hmm. So there's definitely the ability for you to do it yourself. There's also reasons why you might want to hire a professional. So the do-it-yourself approach, I think starting with your employer plan is super helpful. You can increase your contributions, really help put money towards your future. There's a pretty big limit on how much you can contribute to those retirement accounts. It's not just the match. You can do up to this year, it's 23,000 into a
Oh, wow.
regular 401k.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got some big room there that you can contribute. And how to invest those funds, the employer usually has, or like the custodian that the employer uses, usually has a cool little calculator that helps you filter yourself into like a target date fund, which
Okay.
target date funds are super helpful. They're a mutual fund, which is a fund of lots of funds. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to go and pick individual stocks and bonds to kind of build a plan for yourself. It does it for you. And the cool part about it too is the closer you get to the date that you pick. So let's say we pick 2040.
Mm-hmm.
The closer we get to that year, the more and more conservative the investment allocation gets, which is
Okay.
super helpful. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can also look at target date funds if you're doing it yourself. So if you're opening like an IRA, which is an individual retirement account, you can purchase those types of funds outside of your employer account too, which is pretty cool. Now, when a professional might be helpful is when or if you feel uncomfortable doing it yourself. So, for example, like I probably would not try to fix a complicated, well, I'm not going to say complicated, but let's say my fan in my room stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an electrician. I don't know how to fix anything electrical.
Right.
I don't know if
Right.
it's the product, I don't know if it's the wires.
Right.
So I'm going to hire someone who does that every day. Now, there are unfortunately stories about people who do get taken advantage of if they're hiring somebody for financial planning. Now, I think the best way to try to filter out some of the folks that are probably not as educated in the space or don't have your best interests at heart, I think you'd want to look for a certified financial planner, a chartered financial consultant, someone with some letters behind their name. Let's
Mm-hmm.
start there.
Mm-hmm.
And because a certified financial planner, especially, they have a fiduciary responsibility to you. So that is huge. That's just like an attorney to their client.
Right.
You have that fiduciary duty. So if you're interested in hiring help, that's what I would look for because they're very educated. That's kind of like passing the bar in the financial planning space, getting your
Mm-hmm.
CFP. And so if you're working with someone like that, Make sure you know what their pay structure is. Like, how do you pay them for their advice? Do you pay just a flat fee? Do they charge a percentage of the investments that they're managing for you? And just make sure you feel comfortable with how they're charging for their services. Yeah.
So speaking of knowing what to look for when you're seeking out professional assistance with investing, are there like red flags that the listeners should be aware of when they're trying to select someone?
That's a really great question. So yes, I think red flags would be if you feel like the person is really pushy. Like if you feel like they're pushing a recommendation or a product, especially on you, that's a big red flag because that means they probably don't have your best interests at heart. Now that might be different if, the advisor, the CFP, let's say, is saying, "Hey, you probably need some health insurance." Like
Hmm.
you probably need that, right? Like
Right,
there's certain things where like you probably need in your financial plan. So
right.
I think you could use your judgment there, but if you feel uncomfortable or you feel like that person is being really pushy towards a product or something specific, that's usually a big red flag.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm taking notes here because again, we're doing three things to do in 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess from the investment standpoint, the thing that our audience could do if they haven't already is to participate in their employer plan and get the match, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's something that they could do that's probably relatively easy to do and it might not hurt so bad because um they're going to get a match for it and they don't have to really do like a ton of paperwork or even seek out somebody to help with
Mm-hmm.
that. The employer has a somebody in place for that. So
Mm-hmm.
in review, because I know you got to go. I appreciate you so much for stopping by.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got it.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of budgeting, the thing to do within the next 30 days, and we'll call this item number one because we said three things to do,
Mm-hmm.
is to make sure you're aware. Make sure you're aware of what you have coming in and where your money's going. And then our next big bucket was saving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that we'll call number two of our three things to do in 30 days. Um, and you gave us three, you said immediate, intermediate, and then retirement. And so
Mm-hmm.
for immediate, which would also include emergency savings, we need or we could do an online savings account with a high yield. And I think you said
Mm-hmm.
those, a lot of them are around 4% right now. So
Mm-hmm.
that's actionable. That's something we can do. And
Mm-hmm.
then for our number three, which was investing, we could participate in our employer plan,
Mm-hmm.
our employees' retirement plan, and make sure we get the match, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like this is all doable, Megan. I feel like people could like take all of these right now with a little bit of pain, but not a lot of
Yeah.
pain, and not a
Mm-hmm.
tremendous amount of effort, and get them all done. But that was just kind of how I framed the conversation, the three things to do in 30 days for budgeting, around budgeting, saving, and investing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're the professional, right? So I can't let you get out of here without telling us what one thing that you think we should know or something we can do, maybe not even in the topics we covered, but it could be,
Mm-hmm.
in the next 30 days to improve our financial health. What do we need to know, Coach Megan?
Mm-hmm. So I think what you would need to do, or yeah, you could do this as an actionable item. I think you should sit down and think about what your goals are. So what are your goals for the next year? So don't even get overwhelmed with thinking about 20 years from now or retirement. Like just think about like the next year, the next couple years, and think about what in your life financially you'd like to improve. Do you want to feel better about where your savings account is? Do you want to feel better about retirement? Do you want to help out your sister, with something coming up? Like, what are those goals that you have? List them out. And then I think with some of the actionable steps we talked about today, you can start working towards those goals. I think a lot of times with finance, it can sometimes feel, in personal finance, it could feel kind of overwhelming to think
Mm-hmm.
about like all the things personal finance touches.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if you have some ideas of what you're trying to accomplish, that can help you make an actionable plan. Like having a goal, knowing what direction to walk in can be super helpful and give you a lot more clarity in your finances.
Okay. And it's interesting you say that because I'm hearing that I hear a lot like so many professionals and so many people have student loan debt.
Mm-hmm.
And now they say the number is over 40 million in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of people. And I know that you are a certified student loan professional. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wonder if and this is kind of really off topic, but it just hit me. So I'm just
Yeah,
venting.
no, I love it. I'm with it.
Do you see people making headway at all in terms of getting that student loan debt down?
Mhm.
Um,
So it depends. With student loans, I do work with a lot of folks who have student loans, and that's a big part of their, well, I won't say big part, but it's a big piece to the puzzle that we have to navigate in your
mhm,
finances really early on, usually. Um, and there's two routes we can go with paying down your student loans. We either should be going towards a forgiveness route, so paying towards either public service loan forgiveness or the income driven repayment forgiveness plans, or we should be paying the loans off like a regular
okay,
debt.
okay,
So we have to filter ourselves into one of those buckets. If we're working in public service, then we should be considering that public service program. If our balance is a lot greater than our income, that's when we should be considering loan forgiveness. Or if we've been in repayment for a long time already, that could be a reason to consider loan forgiveness too. Um, but on the alternative, let's say your balance is lower than income, we're not working in public service, then we should be probably paying it down more aggressively. So as long as we know what bucket we should be in there,
hmm,
I do see a lot of very positive progress.
okay.
Um, yeah, so I think you just have to know what you're doing with your loan situation. Um,
So
mhm.
So thank you for that bonus info
Yeah.
regarding student loans, because I know a lot of our audience members do have those. I want to thank you so much for coming by.
Mhm.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. You can't see my sheet, but it's full of notes because
Oh,
I
I love it.
know that you're the expert in this field, and so your recommendations are golden. And so I've
Mhm.
got a piece of paper with a lot of them on here. I want to invite those listening who are not already members of the Georgia Association for Women Lawyers to please consider joining our organization. This is an organization that supports women in the legal profession. There is a social networking component, there is a professional networking component, professional development, as well as mentoring. So, regardless of what stage you are in your career, GAWL has something for you. Check us out on the website at www.gawl.org, and we're spelling GAWL GAWL for Georgia Association for Women Lawyers. Thank you for coming by, Coach Meagan. I have notes and I understand the assignment. Until next time, go be financially well.